Attention PMU artists. If you are out there performing microblading, that's your technique of choice. Nothing wrong with that. But you're working on oily skin or dark skin clients, you definitely need to watch this video because I'm going to tell you why microblading is not the best option for your clients. There, I said it. It's not the best option, and learn why in this video. Alright, so before we begin, go on and hit that subscribe button and hit that notifications button as well so you can get notified whenever I release amazing videos because I got a lot more coming up. So let me just start by saying that I know this could be a little bit touchy for, some artists. Some people really love microblading. I actually love microblading. It's for the right client. So I'm speaking about a specific group of people, talking about clients in Fitzpatrick's 5 and 6. So deeper tones, varying ethnicities, but just on the darker skin side, as well as oily skin clients. So for me personally, I got microblading done back in 2016, and I've had it done a couple of times, but after my first session, there was no stroke visibility. It kind of ended up looking very shaded. There were no hair strokes, no crispness. But back in 2016, I didn't really know much about the way it was supposed to look. So I just knew the way my clients, as well as myself, the way my brows looked when they healed. So as I continued on and started learning more and more about the technique and seeing the difference between the way it healed on lighter complexions, Fitzpatrick's 1 through 3, even 4 sometimes, versus the 5 and the 6 clients, I noticed, okay, it's healing completely different. So I just made a separation. I even created a post on my Instagram saying how hair strokes will heal in lighter clients versus how they will heal in darker clients. And in the image, you clearly see that on the darker clients that the strokes are blurred, and they were still visible, but they were definitely more haloed with a haze of shading around each stroke. And I just thought that was how it was going to be, and that's okay if that is what a person wants. But generally, when you get a hair stroke or you're requesting microblading, you're wanting the brows to look healed. Like, you want the healed result to be nice and crisp hair strokes. You don't want blurred, shaded, faded hair strokes. That's ombre, right? Or powder brows. And if you wanted a powder brows, you would have booked the powder brow service. So for me personally, I didn't find that it healed the way I wanted. It was not crisp strokes. There were no hair strokes. Like, if I just wiped the makeup off and got up real close in the camera, I'm not going to do that today. But if I did, you would see that there are no visible hair strokes. I did have the procedure done later, like a year and a half later, by a really amazing artist, and it was the same thing. And I know it's just my skin. I'm oily. My skin's darker. I just know what's going to happen. But I was just at that point more interested in having filled in brows than anything. Since I've had them done again last year, it's 2020, last year. Now I just went to ombre. I'm like, okay, we're just not, forget the hair strokes. We're just going to do ombre. That's all I care about, is just having some color on my eyebrows. So I just want you to know that microblading, in my case and in many other cases, like, I've worked on thousands of clients, ladies and gentlemen, and I have seen it happen time and time again. Every now and then you'll get that amazing, healed result. But in general, everyone's skin doesn't heal like that. And I had to, stop setting those expectations that I thought it was going to heal like it would on lighter Fitzpatrick's. It just wasn't going to do that. So I began to let my clients know that and educate them. But at the end of the day, it's like, why don't we just provide the best service for our guests? If they want a hair stroke and we know that a microblading hair stroke isn't going to give them that look, then give them a technique that will provide that crisp hair stroke, or it's more likely to give them a crisp hair stroke, okay? Or a powder brow. So I'm going to talk about that later on. But for now, I want to get into why microblading isn't the best technique for deeper skin tones as well as oily skin. All right, so why is microblading not good for darker skin tones and oily skin? So point number one, excessive oiliness can blur your strokes. So say you get your brows microbladed. You've got these beautifully created hair strokes in your skin once they're fresh, right? And it could be a few different reasons why they end up being blurred. So just off the bat, let's just talk about the first point. When any kind of stroke is created in the skin, if you have oiliness, it's always going to widen. Now, in general, a stroke will widen just because when it heals, it always spreads out just a little bit. But when your skin is oily, it spreads out a little bit more. So depending on the size of the needle, if someone's using a thicker diameter needle, your strokes could end up pretty wide. In addition to that, if they're stacked too close together, because sometimes you're like a client or an artist prefers to make the brows stack really close together so that it gives this really defined baseline and top line, right? But again, I've just talked about how the strokes will blur out, or they're widened. So if you pack your strokes in really close together and then every stroke widens, what you're going to end up with is a brow that ends up looking like a shaded in eyebrow. And unless that's what your client requested, you're going to be upset. You're going to say, I came here for hair strokes. I really wanted it to look soft and natural, and I don't see any strokes at all. All I see is shade. And I know that can happen. It happened to me. So I just want you to understand the danger of packing strokes in and then even just using this technique on oily skin. The strokes will begin to spread out. And I'm sure if you've worked on oily skin clients and darker skin clients, you've experienced this. You know what this looks like. And then you've had those clients that have said, oh my God, this isn't what I wanted. And even trying to remove this is not the easiest. It's not like, oh, it's just going to go away in one removal session. This takes several sessions to lighten. It could take like up to 10, 8, 5 sessions, and that's pricey. So it's better to not do this technique for this reason. That's point number one. So second point is retention. So when you have a hair stroke, let's make a big one. So you have a hair stroke here. Let's do it too. When the skin is oily, the pigments have glycerin in them as well. So oil and oil, what happens? It absorbs into one another, right? So when you have these strokes and very oily skin, what happens as it heals is the oil begins to fade out the strokes at a faster rate than someone with dry skin that doesn't have a lot of oil production. So the brows will begin to fade very fast. So oftentimes after the first session, sometimes you need to redo the entire brow sometimes, or it just looks really spotty because all that oil in the skin has taken a lot of the depth out of the stroke. Or even just on a long-term basis, Microblading can last a year, year and a half in the skin, but for oily clients, it can be 6 months, 9 months, up to a year, in some cases longer, but in general, you're gonna have a faster fade in your darker skin clients because the oil it's like, get that out of here. It's absorbing your pigment. So this is another reason why it's not necessarily the best technique for your clients who are darker and have oily skin. Okay, so number 3 is the ashiness. Now, if you have worked on oily clients or even darker clients, you know that the skin can ash out very easily with the pigments. So ashy tone is like a grayish tone, and gray falls under the family of blue. So if someone gets microblading and their strokes look ashy, like gray, so let me add a little black in there too, but again, that falls under the blue family, you would use an orange corrector on top of that hair stroke to try to balance it and turn it back to brown. The challenge is that when strokes are really dark, so if you have a really dark gray hair stroke, it's really gray and it's dark and it's kind of blurred out. And even if you put some, I only have red, sorry guys, I don't have orange. But even if you put that orange directly on top, the color is very dark. So it's going to absorb into that stroke. It's not really going to change it to that brown tone like you want. It's not going to make it lighter. So like for instance, hair color. If someone has black hair color and they're like, I want to do a light brown, and you just put a deposit of color on top, it's still going to be black. You have to lift the color with bleach or something that will lift the color to turn it lighter. Just to give you an example, if you're not all that familiar with color theory. So the same is true for correcting gray or any eyebrow, but correcting gray brows in particular. If it's a really dark color, and again, we're talking about darker skin. So if you're talking about darker skin and using one of the darker pigment shades, it's gonna be closer to black, right? It's gonna be dark browns, the deeper browns. So if these colors ash out and then you take an orange color and you go on top, it's still going to look very, very dark. It's still going to have some of that ash tone in there sometimes. It's very challenging to correct this. So it's best to not do a technique that's going to cut the skin and go into the layers of the lower layers of the epidermis in the way that a microblade does, because of all the trauma that's created, potential bleeding that's created, the lymph that's created, because it has that large or quick potential to turn your strokes gray. All right. Number 4, creating those cuts in the skin in darker skin clients, there's a higher risk of scar tissue. So the skin can scar even with your best efforts to not scar the skin. You're working in the right layers, the lower layers of the epidermis, right between the dermal and epidermal layer. You can still create scar tissue, especially if you are repeatedly going into those same strokes over time. You come back for that client comes back for that touch-up session, you're reinforcing those strokes. And then maybe they need to come back in 9 months or a year. You're reinforcing those strokes again. You're reopening those cuts, and it can affect the skin in those darker skin tones because it's just more delicate. So, and there's nothing you can do about it. If that person wants the hair stroke and it's time for their touch-up, you got to go back in those cuts, right? So, or in those strokes. So just beware that you could be creating scar tissue, even if you didn't intend to, even if you are highly trained and you're using your best practices, it's still something that could develop underneath the skin, even if it's not visible to the naked eye. All right, so I want to talk about just a microblade slope blade and then a U blade. So here with a slope blade, you have all these pins and you're grazing that against the skin. Now, you really shouldn't be going deeper than the bottom layers of your epidermis. You should not be cutting and really opening the skin up where you're seeing blood instantly in all your clients. It really should be something very superficial. But again, you are working on oily skin and darker complexions, so the fade factor is always a lot higher. But because you are cutting and opening, the body is sending, it's a signal to the body, so it's going to rush blood to that area. You'll develop some redness. There'll be some swelling potentially, some lymph fluid, which is why we, get the scabbing and things like that, because now the body is trying to heal the wound. So these instruments, again, they're opening up the skin. By doing that, you're at risk of creating scar tissue. Okay, so the moment we've been waiting for. What techniques are good for oily skin and dark skin clients? Nano eyebrows, which is a machine hair stroke technique. That's going to be your preferred technique for creating that hair stroke look in your darker and your oily skin clients. The reason is because there is no cutting. So that's going to wipe out a whole lot of the different disadvantages to microblading just off the bat. Hey everyone, I wanted to pop in really fast and just add some context to what you're seeing on the screen. I am using my AMIA device. It is one of the best PMU devices in the industry. I call it my Rolls Royce. So if you like Rolls Royces, you need to click that description box and find out more information about that machine. In addition, I have a lot of really great opportunities for you to learn more about Nano. I have a video here that you can click and watch and get some really great information. Also, I have classes for you. I have some online training as well as in-person classes that I'd love for you to attend. So visit my description box again and click those links so that you can get more information about our classes. Finally, nano needle brows, y'all. Nano needle hair strokes. Less cutting, no cutting. Less trauma for the skin, as well as better retention. And if you perform the service correctly, which takes great training, you will have great results every time. Also, this procedure is a lot less painful for your clients. Cutting can be really irritating, but this method, there's like virtually no pain, or it's very minimal for your guests. You'll find that your strokes aren't as grayed out. They tend to stay truer to color because you're not cutting the skin and there's less trauma. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing from you, and also share this video. Okay, until next time, bye-bye.